Hey everybody, I wanted to welcome you all to the December edition of the Agile at Scale Special Interest Group. We've got a great presentation in store today, but first, if you've never attended an Agile Austin event, got a little bit of information about the organization that helps make events like this possible. Our mission is to connect people and foster professional growth through collaborative events and really all about that communication. We are a 501c6 nonprofit organization. And as you'll see, we rely on our membership dues as well as sponsorship to sustain us. Our 2024-25 Agile Austin Board of Directors, of course, have the esteemed Max Acasey as our president, Sid Markle, Chase Callaghan, myself, Jenny Halcomb. Really fantastic board, if I do say so. And we were, of course, preceded by greats by like Matt Roberts, who will be presenting for us today. So great organization we've had for many years. Wanted to thank our platinum sponsors, Agile Velocity. They've been with us for ages and ages now. Really appreciate all of the support they've had for us over the years. So definitely check them out. I'll have some links in the chat in a little bit for that. A new sponsor for this year, ResumeX. They are empowering remote teams and championing ethics, and occasionally they have workshops and other stuff that we'll present and promote. So check those out. And also our silver sponsor, Ad Meliora Coaching. Very happy to have them on board as well. In Agile Velocity, you can use the code Agile Austin for all public workshops to get 15% off. And again, fantastic sponsor. Check out all of their services. And if you would like to become a sponsor or your organization would like to, just reach out, contact at agileaustin.org. We can show you what the benefits are at each level. And also, like I said earlier, our membership fees sustain us. It's been $35 per year for years and years now. So we have not been bitten by the inflation bug and just would love to have you as a member. We have a lot of great SIGs. So our Agile coaching SIG happens on monthly basis, usually in the evenings. This one, Agile at Scale, is usually on Fridays, but having a special Wednesday one to kind of get it in before everybody kind of disappears for the holiday break. Our book club's still going strong over Zoom. Ned Horvath continues to lead that. Product and AI SIG, Matt is a co-lead for that. Really fantastic presentations. If you are wanting to learn about AI and especially in the product space, that's definitely something to check out. Leader SIG, Max has been leading that. Matt and I, in fact, will be on a panel for that this coming Friday. So check that out on our meetup page. And Lean Kanban SIG still is happening as well. I wanted to mention that Keep Austin Agile 2025 is right around the corner, coming up in April. So I'll also put that link in the chat. That is both in person and virtual. And it will be at the AT&T conference. Well, not the AT&T Conference Center, the Pickle Research Center on the UT campus, which is actually the far north portion near the domain. So we had it there last year in person as well as virtual. Worked out really well. Happy to be back there in 2025 and working with UT to make that a successful event. So tickets are on sale now. We've got sponsors already lined up that we'll be talking about in future meetups. So you can check out that link for more details, and we will present that here in a bit. I don't know. Oh, there was also professional development scholarship opportunities. I'll post a link to that in the chat as well. But I think I had an old link there. Um, Anyways, about this SIG, the Agile at Scale SIG. So been doing it since 2016. Leland Newsom started it. I joined him in 2020 after having run the QA SIG with Colin Turner. Shout out to Colin. It's good to see your face there. Um, had a lot of fun with Colin in the QA SIG back in the day, but moved on over to the Agile at Scale SIG with Leland in 2020 and been having fun with him ever since. Upcoming topics, Daniel Walsh. Topic is coming soon for January, so should see an announcement before the end of the month on that, our meetup page. And then February, we'll have Michael McCall, why flow metrics are not enough. And then we don't have a topic yet or a presenter, but if you are interested in speaking in March, I'll have some contact info for you here in a minute. But first, Matt Roberts, software development, not developer productivity metrics today. Looking forward to a fantastic presentation. As I said, Matt has a long storied history with Agile Austin, and I've definitely enjoyed all of his presentations. Really looking forward to this one today. And finally, yeah, contact information if you have anything for me and Leland, leland.newsom@agileaustin.org or ben.rogers@agileaustin.org. And with that, that's all I have to say. I am going to stop my sharing and pass it on over to Matt. So, Matt, you take us away.
Well, thanks so much, Ben, and so good to see so many faces. Steve Telecki, gosh, it's been a minute. And Jared and
Yeah.
Colin and Steve and I also were part of the IEEE Computer Society for a number of years, and we were doing Agile Awesome, IEEE Computer Society, and everything. So it's so good to see so many folks, and there's been so much learning and so much value that I've gotten from all of our communities in Austin. So it just feels good to give back. And one of the primary things is, and I'll hopefully I won't quote too much Amazon stuff. I was only there for 2 years, but there's a lot of really good models there, and I'll sort of use some of those models. But uh, one of my favorite that I heard, but maybe I didn't see too much, was leaders seek to disconfirm their beliefs, and I think that's where learning happens. It's a weird statement, like they seek to disconfirm their beliefs, right? It comes from kind of like empiricism and science, and so by sharing this, I'm I'm more in it to get feedback about how I'm wrong than like convincing y'all that I'm right. And to that end, I don't have anything to sell. I am a practitioner. I'm maybe not a software a builder of code much anymore, but I'm a builder of systems of people, products, and technology, and process or mechanisms in that order, and trying to maximize the customer value back to the, if you want to call them the Agile manifesto, lean principles, all that kind of good stuff. Like, how do we get customers the most value, and the builders who build that value, the sellers who sell that value, and the supporters that support that value? How do they, each of those stakeholders, get the most out of that system? And by building and delivering value, the engineers, and that's kind of where I'm closely aligned. How do they build their career? How do they learn? How do they grow? How does that whole system work like a flywheel to continue to maximize benefits to everybody? So development metrics and developer metrics are a source of controversy. So I like doing things that are filled with controversy. I'll start sharing my screen here. Uh, know that this is the first time I've done this presentation, and I put the finishing touches on it about 3 minutes ago. So like y'all are seeing it for the first time. And let's see here. How do I share a window? Sorry, I got some Zoom. Okay, cool. Can y'all see my screen? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
So you all, I think a lot of us back in 2023 might have seen this. It caused a lot of controversy of this McKinsey report about measuring software developer productivity. And it just like, it sort of blew up, and people were like, this is so stupid. This is so dumb. And, yet again, kind of a good concept and a good model, and like one word, I think, just that's what really broke it for me. It's like, don't call it developer, it's really development. And then when you do that, you're getting away from the human to the system. And it's not like this report had wrong stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is good. Of course, it was borrowed from all sorts of things that probably many of us have used for many years. Um, and and then it starts getting into like system, team, and then it goes down to the individual, right? But it like sort of led with this statement of yes, you can measure software developer productivity. And that's kind of like, you almost had it. You almost had it. And maybe they did it because of controversy. So I had been using metrics and data to make all sorts of decisions throughout most of my professional career. And what I have found, and I've done a couple of presentations. If you're curious, you can hit me up. Some of you have seen it, the radical road mapping and continuous capacity planning, all these kinds of things, which all rely on these sort of like gross level, actually the high level metrics to help us make good decisions. And so at the this last company, or I should say Skykick, where I say I was because we were just acquired when I ConnectWise, which is a much larger company. Um, I came in and noticed that we had metrics in use. Pretty big team, it's about 170 engineers, um, and people were scrambling. Um, they didn't quite know why they were using the metrics and how to use them effectively to help us, serve our customers and serve our own team through that process. So that's the genesis of this presentation, is to talk to you about a little bit of the journey that I went on and then get your feedback on it. Um, so here's hopefully you've seen this kind of thing. Here's my typical, like, done well. They help team members make more impactful contributions and build trust across the organization, and they offer critical evidence to change trade-off to trade-and decisions. That's one of my marketing-y things saying. That's one of my presentation titles. Radical road mapping turned into trade-and decisions. So you can do more than just one thing at a time. Here's me. God, that's a big head. I live in Seattle. I've been software industry for 20 years. Starting back in school, a lot of date products that provide actionable or maybe intelligent insight to customers now that we're doing the AI thing, and a few other types of things. I've mostly worked in the small company space, and then keep getting acquired by big companies. And that sort of seems to be my lot in life. And I'm here for it. As Ben mentioned, I've contributed to Agile Austin in a number of ways over many years. So what I want to go into here, and is my way of thinking about these metrics and why they should be used and what they're important. And like, here's my pitch to y'all: is that it's really about the most important thing of this presentation. I think broadly, if we're talking about scale, we're talking about the whole organization, both, you know, our team members, developers, sort of connecting to the most important things and how to make good decisions, to stakeholder alignment, either, to support or sales or COO or CFO, or those kinds of verticals of the business or other related business units, depending if we get big enough. And then in my case, you would call it the investor community, because I've actually used these, for board of directors, investors, pitches and things like that. And of course, I just went through acquisitions. So if you've ever done that, there's something called due diligence. And it is a very detailed inspection of how everything is done when one company is buying another or investing in the company. And so a lot of these metrics can be helpful in addressing these things. So, um, so I think development can and should convey meaning within and outside of your organization. And I'm going to treat everybody here like they're responsible for the development metrics. Somebody's told you, like, hey, let's get metrics to prove that you're good or invest or whatever the case may be. Now, there is something called productivity metrics for individuals, and they're very important. The thing that I think is missing is they require, or why they're not useful outside of the organization, is they require, at least for like any functional organization, you have to understand what that means. There's a lot of context, and so you need to have expertise. It's and usually you don't have it, because if you have a functional engineering organization, is the finance team or the sales team going to know how to interpret what it means to be a developer day to day? Like, probably not, and vice versa as well. And so you can look at the organization and what it's doing as an external stakeholder, but actually the individuals requires a deep amount of context. And typically you're going to start getting into, like, I want my most senior engineers to be able to, you know, provide leveling information and calibration information of my team, and there's metrics that are part of that, but there's other things, so it gets real complicated. It's not super useful outside of an engineering team to do that for an individual developer. So that's my pitch. Anybody think I'm off on this one before I go down? Okay, I'll move on. So I think, because I do think a lot about product. I think about product and engineering, and I've led both functions before. There's always building the thing right, which is engineering, and product is usually building the right thing. Of course, we want to build the right thing right. My focus for many years was getting dissatisfied with building the thing right, but then not building the right thing. So oftentimes I get into like product. It's like, well, what are we doing? Who are your customers? Who are your stakeholders? Who are the primary stakeholders? Like whose opinion counts more than others? Who are the closest stakeholders? Who are the friendliest? And every time you got the word stakeholder, you can use the word customer, right? Like that's a thing. Who are the unhappiest ones? And I just started asking a lot of these questions, like, what does trust look like? Like, if high trust environments are very different than low trust environments. There's a guy named Stephen Covey Jr. who wrote the book. He was the son of the more famous, I guess, Stephen Covey, but his book is Moving at the Speed of Trust. And it really opened my mind that I'm a trust first person, but when there's low trust, and I've come into organizations where there's low trust with engineering typically, and vice versa, but they're like, they all want to know, the external stakeholders want to know, what am I going to get? When am I going to get it? And what's it going to cost me? Forever. It won't change. I don't care what agile lead and kind of thing. You always have to answer those questions so people in their terms they understand it. And if high trust, you can move a lot faster. Low trust, you got to slow down to move fast. Um, what problems are they trying to solve? What is their day to day like? What do they need from you? What solutions do they have today? And what's working for them and not working for them? I ask this question a lot, like, what does good look like to you? Cool. What would excellent look like to you? Like, and typically what you find is that it's less, there's problems with trust in engineering. They're having a hard time doing their job. They may not understand engineering's moving slow. Okay, great. Let's start with that. What does that mean to you? Like, how do you know it's moving slow? And because it's moving slow, assume that they're right in their model. How do you how does that hurt you? Or better yet, if it changed, how would it help you? If it changed for much the better, how would it get you a promotion, right? I mean, like, I'm just sort of like throwing things out, right? Um, and then, from internally, like, if you're going to start about like thinking about product management, and some of us have followed some of the like the Reinerson stuff, which got implemented in SAFe, which is weighted shortest job first, which is simply a model just saying, go rank all the things that you want to do. What's the thing that's the highest value and the quickest to get done, right? And this gets into theory of constraints and all a bunch of other kinds of things. But anywho, it's a pretty simple model. And then you're like, okay, well, what's harder to implement and lower value? Okay, don't do that, right? So that, to me, this is a great way to start thinking about, like, I'm building a product. My product is this organization, this engineering organization. What do my stakeholders need to have to be successful? And again, these stakeholders absolutely include the people in the organization, right? Like, first and foremost. And I've run into this many times where people say, well, they need this information, they need this information, or that my last company, the CEO said this, the CEO said this, the CEO said they need that. I'm like, okay, stop. The next thing that I want you to tell me, and but say it in your head, if I believe anything in that I've ever believed before, this is what I believe. Right? Like, start with you, and then, like, let's understand what the people say that are in authority positions, but really think about what matters to you and your teams, from a software development. I'm going to use the term engineering going forward because it's the one I typically use. Um, so this is how I'm going to start this whole thing. Does that track? Any feedback on this one?
Sounds good. Hear ya, hear ya.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. Like, and there's all sorts of product management stuff and models and all these kinds of things. So not trying to say these are the best. Okay. Um, Step two, your development productivity metrics exist within a broader system. This is another piece of feedback I get from folks outside of engineering. It's like, the engineers are just working on this technical debt, and I get technical debt. It seems like a necessary evil, like, and they got to do it. But right now, we just don't have time for technical debt. And all of a sudden, I've found that okay, these folks, and this can go all the way to like product folks, right? I was like, it's a fail of product to me. It says, hey, the developers just worry about the technical debt or engineering excellence. I don't care about that. They just do that. It's not what I do. I'm like, what if you actually cared about it? What if it was like your goal in life to get them more capacity to focus on that? It's like, that's not my thing. I'm like, but what if it was? What would have to be true? And you're like, well, I'd like to go faster. Cool. That's a good one. Like, you'd like to go faster. I'd like there to be many fewer production incidents that take up my time to go explain to customers why our products are broken. That's a good one too. Keep going. Keep talking. So this broader system is really important to understand. Like, it's sort of a restatement of kind of the product kind of thing. The other thing that I find in the broader system, and this is a quote from one of the Amazon leadership principles: constraints can drive creativity and innovation. And think about that for a second. Like, we must have constraints. Constraints are good things. If we have no constraints, usually art doesn't happen. Hitchcock, I don't know if you know Hitchcock as a director, he would put a constraint in his movies. He was the most famous director at the time. He could do anything he wanted to. He said, I'm going to have I'm going to have one sort of angle shot. I'm not going to have a dolly. I'm not going to have like different length, focus length lenses, things like that. I'm like going to shoot with the same thing. He had to have something because that is what makes creativity happen and innovation. We're not about, you know, following a plan specifically. We're about, adapting and like delivering the most value. So we really have to create space for creativity. Standards, I find, and this comes from, multiple books that talk about like influence or getting to yes, all these kinds of things. It's really great to like figure out what the standards are in the organization. And if you don't have any, maybe you should create your own. Um, and then I think a lot about ownership. What does ownership look like? What does that model look like? There's a lot of like kind of nice things to say, like, we all own this. And I'm like, yeah, cool. All right. What specifically do you own, and what does that ownership mean? What is the agency model? If you own something, you have stakeholders. What does that look like? Um, and then, of course, from anytime people talk about metrics, and I've heard this about the ones you're going to see here, people will say concurrently at a big company like ConnectWise, your metrics will never scale up, because this is much bigger. I've also heard at small companies, Skykick, this is way too much for the size of the company we are. Like, I've heard it all, right? The these are all solvable things, but I think it's important to think about how you're going to scale in the future and how those metrics will support you. So think about the broader system. Um, hey, ownership. I talk a lot about ownership. You own them, nobody else. As soon as the other owns your productivity metrics for your organization, that is the all is lost moment, because it's kind of like now you're just feeding information into something that you don't know what they're going to do with them. So they shouldn't be handed down to you. Um, don't use other names. Oh, this is like people like this is my like, oh, this person, authority person said, I got to have this piece of information. So we got to do it. And I'll ask, okay, cool. That person said it. Why is that important for them? And why is it important for you? I don't know. They told us to do it. Okay, please stop. Um, when you think about ownership, I always think about the art of the possible. This is a very agile term. We see a lot of this. Like, what is possible now? Like, there's a lot of like interesting words there. Art of the possible. It's like, what is actually possible? And sometimes it's a constraining thing, like it limits, and sometimes it's a broadening thing. Like, what if we could do more, right? So like, use judgment. Start small yet effective. Try to like shrink it down. What if you only just had one? What if you had only one productivity metric? That's it for the entire organization. Some people say we need thousands, we need hundreds. We already have 100. Do those 100 mean anything to you? What if you just had one? What if you is the one that is there today? Um, I would avoid best practices. For those of you who know me for many years, if somebody says justify something as best practices, it makes me very irate. So they're not bad. A lot of people do them, but you have to understand why they are the way they are and what context they're in. Um, Many years ago, I heard when we were doing the Agile DevOps or the Agile Austin DevOps SIG, there are a bunch of salty DevOps folks, and the guy came in the office where we hosted all our meetings. And he said, Matt, I don't care about anybody who is ever successful. All I want to hear about in these meetings is how people fail. And I was like, that's that's a very DevOps circa 10 years ago kind of guy. But very true. It's like we learn from failure, right? Like in like the success things are good, right? Don't shun it, but it's kind of like it's really interesting to learn how people have failed, right? Because you learn through failure. Avoid tooling defaults. There's so many tools right now. Like we use Azure DevOps because it was a Microsoft shop. There's Jira, there's Jellyfish, there's like a billion of these tools out there that can give you insight, and then all of a sudden these tools have an opinion, and the opinion is not wrong, but it might not be yours. Like you have to define what your opinion is and what your tastes are and what problems you're trying to solve. um, so I would avoid those defaults. Use them, right? It's good to use them if they're valuable to you, right? Go to the Gemba. That's a very lean term. Go to the place where the value is being created. Typically, that means the workers, the people that are the individual contributors building the software. Like, go to them, talk to them, find out what is painful for them, what is tough for them. And in some of the wisdom from sources, there's a book called Accelerate, Gene Kim et al. The guys are at Phoenix Project and all these kinds of amazing books. Have some really great stuff. This is the book. Hold on, let me get my screen here. Here's Accelerate. Uh, all sorts of good Jez Humble, all sorts of really great guys. There is also Dora metrics, 4 key performance indicators, deployment frequency, lead time changes, change failure rate, and MTT are all really good stuff. Like it's pretty common. If you were to say like best practices, like these are things to absolutely consider. Another couple of other sources of wisdom is you can look at. We use some of the well-architected stuff in a little bit different context, engineering excellence pillars, which are a little bit different than our MBR, which I'm going to show you all. But this is like operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and they just added sustainability. We'll see how long that one's around. Anywho, so these 5 were the original ones. And if you're an Azure shop, hey, guess what? They're the same damn things. So, except maybe not sustainability. Let's see if they added that one. Not yet. They're still on 5. They'll add sustainability before you know it. Data centers below the sea. So these are all like really good ways of thinking about it. And, some of these well-architected things, don't worry so much about if you're on AWS, making sure your solution is well-architected, but it's like, these are great models to think about like what you want to do and why you want to do it, what problem you're trying to solve. So I consider those, and then engagement surveys that is sort of close to Accelerate and Dora, which is like, and going to the Gemba, which is like, what are the builders saying? What are your team members saying is really slowing them down, right? Uh, cool. Okay, that's my pitch. Then I'm gonna show how to get started and a sample of what I've used. Any feedback so far on this? Am I off the mark? Am I missing something?
I think everything looks good. There were a couple comments in the chat
Oh yeah.
about if you want to scroll back.
So, I like this. Oh
And
yeah. The far side. That's great. Man. uh, oh, that's cool. Resiliency, nice. Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing resiliency. Yeah, that's a lot of the. You start getting into all sorts of really advanced. I'm going to start with kind of the basics. That you can get really interesting resiliency, chaos monkey, trying to like take the thing or simian army and take the thing down. And you can like these things. So the one thing that this is the let's get started thing. This is the word that I use. This is relentlessly improve. And you're going to see this. What I'm going to show you all is like month one of me doing this and month 24. And you're going to see that it keeps getting better. That's why I say start small and keep building, keep building, keep building. Your system should relentlessly improve. And absolutely, resiliency is one of those things. It's like, why would you be satisfied with what you have? And, I think one of the things that we do, I was going to call that out. Let's see if I put it here. Uh, I'll add this. I might have put this somewhere else in the presentation, but I was reading this thing. It was some lean thing years ago about probably everybody here has flown on an airplane before. And if I'm looking at a few of us that are sharing videos, we've been around for a while. I don't want to say we're old, but we're older. And you probably remember being on a plane and you would walk on the plane and they would have magazines like in newspapers and stuff like that. And they would have the seat tray or the back pocket that was filled with stuff to read and buy, right? Sky Mall and all those kinds of things. And American Airlines did something really interesting where at some point, because you got all these metrics and data like efficiency experts that cause us a tremendous amount of pain when we're even trying to buy an airplane ticket now, but they started figuring out, like they said, absolutely everything on the plane has to justify its weight, its carrying weight. And they talked about that about the American Airlines magazine. They literally said you can't fly, the magazine can't fly on the plane unless it justifies its carrying weight. And I think what you start seeing happen, and I think about this as metrics too, and it's funny because I just did this. I killed one of my own memos that I sent out that has lots of metrics and data because I'm like, we just got acquired. We don't need to do this anymore. This is no longer a problem. And somebody today actually said, Matt, I really appreciate that every time you schedule a meeting, you schedule it with an end date. Like, and you say, this is why we will end it at this day. And then we can. So it's like, there's always a mechanism there to like sort of destroy the thing that you're doing. Right. Like there's got to be a why for all these things. And you have to question why. And you'll see not exactly, but some of the things have been dropped from my metrics as things change. Right. Um, cool. So how do you get started? I like the small team, and sure, we've got our 7 ± 2 Scrum, human, brain, dynamic, all that kind of stuff. I think you should go even smaller. I started with like 3 to 4 people, and I've picked, and I'll tell you what I did at Skykick. I picked people that were curious and represented sort of out of a 170 person organization, curiosity, insight, and a willingness to learn. And with me too. A curiosity is probably the best term. And I didn't mean that like they were hand picked or like they're the best people. I was like, dude, we're just doing. It's one of the many things that we have to do in running an organization is figure out what our productivity metrics are. So we had that. I have the same team now 2 years later. Create pillars. I like this concept of pillars. You're going to see them like single word. Like that's what we care about. Fewer than 7. I made that number up. It probably shouldn't be 2. 10 seems so much, too much. I don't know. I have 5. And that's happens to be the same number as the well-architected things, which was not, I was like, when I got them, I was like, oh, it matches. Okay, probably an okay thing. Um, write the most powerful questions that the metrics can answer. Start with that. So I've got almost like an epic name, single word, and I've got a question like, how am I answering this kind of thing? And I'm going to show you what I did. Share by default. So I share everything internally. That was interesting at Skykick because it was very siloed culture, and people said, "Do you really want to share this stuff?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We'll see if I get in trouble." I didn't get in trouble. I just kept sharing more and more and more, and nobody got in trouble. Disconfirm your beliefs. This is the statement of like seek people to make you better. Um, Create your first metric based on sort of the weighted first job first. Look at lead versus lag metrics. What does the team actually have control over? Because if you can do that, then they actually feel like they're making a difference. And then you can sort of connect the dots to lag metrics. So don't have revenue be a lead metric for a development team. That doesn't make any sense, right? But development velocity or capacity allocation or number of defects, you start getting a lot more control. Um, I share by default. I write things down. I write memos. I do PowerPoint presentations. Um, Write it down, avoiding adjectives. That's another very Amazon thing. I'm like, it now bugs me to ever see an adjective in anything. Like, I can't deal with an adjective. I just need a number, like, or something, so I can understand what this means. PowerPoint presentations drive me bananas. I like memos. Meet stakeholders where they are. So I actually talk to them and understand their world and translate, and then bring that information back to say, some engineer might say, that's not exactly the right language. And it's like, yeah, that's okay, but it conveys more meaning to our stakeholders. And the final one is relentlessly improve. So we have mechanisms to meet every month, talk about how we did, incorporate feedback, and make it better and better. Okay, let me show you what I did. This is the first month at Skykick, November 2022. New engineering VP, 170-person team had, and then within a few days, somebody said, "Oh yeah, like we have to provide our metrics for the MBR." What's an MBR? Monthly business review. Okay, cool. Um, what what are our metrics? Well, here they all are, and there were story points by team by person. And it was interesting. I see Annie's laughing. I didn't actually think this was still a thing. I've been in my little Agile bubble at Agile Austin and stuff like that, and people say like people are using story points to measure developers. It's like, no, they're not. That was like something a long time ago, and indeed, it was true. No, if you're watching, if you're at Skykick and you're watching this on the recording, no shade. It's a journey for all of us. So, anywho, uh, I essentially said, we're not going to do this anymore. And I did have the authority, so I could sort of fiat it. It's like, this is not a thing that we're going to do anymore. And so I said, let's do something different. Let's do something different. Let's come up with pillars and then ask questions. And I formed my little working group. I met with the CEOs, like made sure like, okay, they're my boss. So like I'm going to say CEOs, there were two of them. I met with them and I really had a deep conversation about what was meaningful to them. Now, they were thinking a lot about ROI. They use that a lot, which is kind of okay for a services world, but it's a lot different for a developer when you have these different probability curves on allocating one product success or one features or one capability or one defect success, all these kinds of things. I think that many of us know that's like near impossible. You might as well just say it's impossible to measure that on a like sort of a classical ROI kind of mechanism. But the thing that was true at the time is that people were running around and saying like, "Oh my God," we call them code reds. There's a code red. Something bad is happening, And this is like, okay, cool. I'm in familiar territory, right? Like, there's quality problems. We know quality. It means different things to different people. But this was the first pillar. We did the 5 pillars. This was in the first month, and we had one question: our Skykick partners, by the way, we sell products to the managed service providers, IT service providers. So our customers are kind of partners and they have customers anyway. So we say our Skykick partners and their customers having a good day using our products. That is the question. Like, and we're going to say yes or no based on production defects and what we called code reds at the time, which was like align everybody, pull the end on cable and everybody goes and fixes these things. And that's what we did. This is literally, we had, I don't know, 50 pages of, there's 170 people, so you can imagine how many different like story points and deltas and all these kinds of things that you can do. If you have all this information about story points by team and team member and stuff like that, make a lot of you can make a lot of hay. Nobody was really using it to make any decisions or anything, but it's there. It's like, cool. Well, here we go. Right. We backtracked it. So I was like, I just started in October and this was November and I was doing this for December. I was like, here it is. Here's what SWAT tickets are: escalations from customer support to engineering. And the code reds are these red things. They're like, this is the number of things. And there were 5 or 4 different products at Skykick. So we broke it down by that. And then people could say, all of a sudden we went from a bunch of perspective or perceptions on like quality's bad, quality's good, development never does anything, blah, 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 support doesn't solve cases, all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden we've got metrics now. And we can like, cool, we've got something. We can sort of iterate from this now. And I think most of folks here probably have seen this. It's like sort of a no-brainer. It's like, start with this thing. And that's what we did. That was my MBR. So that's and it was well received. Nobody asked for the story points anymore. I will tell you, they did talk about, well, you had 2 code reds. What was that? What was the root cause of that? And I'm like thinking back in my head, okay, I got a quality circle or a COE mechanism coming in. For those of you who've done that before, I'm like, that'll be the next step, down the road, down the road. We don't have that right now, but that's going to come. And so, like, you can imagine people are going to want all this information. They're like, and what happened? What did you do about it? How do you prevent it from happening again? Great questions, great decisions, great ways to fill backlogs of improvements, right? Second month. All right, here we go. We answered two more questions. So productivity. And this one was like, we really spent a lot of time, the little working group, we spent a lot of time and we met with stakeholders. Like, what what is the right question? We have to do it with a certain number of words. Um, are we increasing the value we deliver to stakeholders and Skykick partners and their customers? So I clearly defined that we have internal stakeholders who are our customers, and we have Skykick partners who are you and I would we would all probably call our customers. They pay us money, but their customers are actually in our value chain too. So we really have to think about all three of the ways that this value flows. In efficiency, are we reducing waste in the work we do? Now we define these questions without having really any thought of whether we had these metrics or not. By the way, that was like that wasn't like we had these metrics and we did this. We said, what are the pillars? What are the questions? And what would it if we had the answers to these questions with metrics? Wouldn't that be awesome? So here you see, I don't know what happened, why the numbers are gone, but you see the SWAT tickets sort of went up. In some cases, they were duplicative. Like the data wasn't awesome because you could have 8 customers could call in, you could have 8 SWAT tickets, right? It wasn't like the incidents were unique, but the SWAT tickets were not. So it was like, it wasn't perfect, right? It was like, it was good enough to get going. But then now we get into product. So the second one, productivity. Well, how would you measure it? Like that's where like how would we measure productivity? Well, this is where it gets into like something I've done before and something that people it resonated with people. We have 170 people. What in the hell are these 170 people doing? Boom. So you start thinking about let's break it down by the people that we have by group. And we had 4 products, but we also had an SRE group and a shared platform, things like that. So there were like 5 groups, and you could sort of see now we've got the capacity allocation, and you see the investment. Cloud Backup is our number 1 revenue generating product. Cloud Manager is the lowest revenue generating, but it's like the one that's like going to be big and growing. So there's a big investment there because that's sort of the future cloud backup cash cow kind of thing. So now for the first time, people are actually seeing how our capacity is allocated, right? I mean, if you had the budget thing, you could tie it back and do all that kind of stuff. But this was good enough to answer some of those questions. Are we allocated correctly or not? Nobody knows. Like it just is the way it is. And then you start thinking about, well, what are those investments, right? Okay, feature development. Okay, that's innovation. Sustaining engineering. Okay, that's responding to SWAT tickets and support requests and things like that. That's kind of we'd love that to be zero. We'd love feature development to be super high, and the engineering improvements, which is technical debt, 20% maybe is okay. Sort of in a service SaaS, it's probably a bit too low. You probably typically have it closer to 30, but then these other kinds of things are sort of part of it. But it's like for the first time, people were seeing that, right? And that was our productivity metric. That's it. Like that's what we're going to say is productivity. Um, then you can see by group, now you're breaking it down by that work type as well. So now people can start thinking, are we allocated correctly? Are people doing the right kind of things? I'll answer questions later about like, how the hell did you do this? We did not do timesheets. So that wasn't a thing. You can sort of get about 80% by just having managers and directors just count and then allocate people to these different service classes. You get good enough, right? Efficiency. Okay, we're a SaaS. This is old data, so I'm going to share it with you. It's less sensitive now that we're acquired, but we were spending a lot of money on Azure. That is per month, $1 million per month on Azure, right? So our revenue, our, it was a significant portion of our cost of goods sold was this SaaS. We're a storage, we're a backup company primarily, so it makes sense that we have this sort of in some ways having this kind of thing. So nobody had seen it. They're like, we've never seen this. Are developers even allowed to know how much we spend? And I'm like, they better know because they're building the systems and they're like incurring all these costs. And it's like, if they can save a bunch of money, gosh, wouldn't that be a great business outcome, right? And then we could see what's our R&D costs? Like, what's our environment? Whoa, it was that much? We didn't know. Yeah, you just spun up a bunch of things and infrastructure as code. Yay. Now we can spin up 2,000 of them. Are they in use? We don't know, but it's really easy to do. So watch that meter, that Azure meter just go, kind of thing. So this was our second month, guys. Like, this was pretty, I would say, pretty awesome progress in 2 months like this. And we just got stunning feedback from our stakeholders, internal, external. They just had not seen this kind of information. It was relevant to them. The developers, when we did demo Friday and stuff like that, now they're starting to show they've got access. I got access to everybody, the Azure budgeting tools and stuff. And they're like, well, previously we had a team in Ukraine too. So I'm going to do my Ukraine voice, which hopefully Steve's lucky. He's also from Eastern Europe, but he was like, they would just be very like, we have gone from $10,000 per month to $1,000 per month. And I was like, okay, awesome, right? Like now we're celebrating like this great success, and the engineers can start seeing this. And by the way, we had a problem. We were spending way more money than we should have been. That's a story over beers for another time, and what that result was. But all of a sudden people like know, and our stakeholders are like can celebrate. It's like, oh, they were great. Now you're seeing like people getting, like kudos, and they get promotions, and you now you have like data to back up like why people should get promoted, right? That's the productivity kind of metrics. Okay, we're getting time here. So I'm going to cut to the 24th month, which is last month. The 24th month is, I'm not going to share the whole thing here, but I'm going to share a couple of different artifacts. The first thing, when I talked about standards, this was about the third or fourth month. I said, we need a charter. And Amazon, they call them, your tenants. There's a whole bunch of things. We sort of declare what is important for us. Um, Sometimes it's kind of like we're being future focused because we're not this today. So it creates a standard so people can look at it and say, like, this is where all my adjectives come in. This is where I was like, okay, adjectives can be here, right? But I think the ones that I focused on, because these were the problems that I observed after my first 90 days there that we were trying to solve, was sharing by default. That last one was such an important thing because we needed to share. We weren't sharing. Engineers typically like sharing. That's the whole half of the basis of the internet was launching nukes. The other half of the basis of the internet was scientists sharing information among research studies and stuff like the researchers that are trying to like do science. So like this is what we do. The other thing that was really important was using data to prioritize the impact of the problems we solve. And that was something that we weren't doing really well either. Um, and somewhere the other one I have here, which is it not here? Well, anyway, I'll tell you what it is. It's act as an owner with agency. It's uh, it's very important to act as an owner and then understand who your stakeholders are. That's your agency model. Anytime somebody says they want autonomy, and like give me an example of a human being who has autonomy. Like there's some people that are into like sovereignty and personal sovereignty, and you can find some fun YouTube videos and you can see what happens when they meet with cops on the road with their massive paperwork and stuff. But like autonomy is not a thing. It's a placeholder for I want ownership with agency is usually what I find people want. They want to be able to like own something and own it well. Here's all five. The other two, velocity. Are we increasing the rate that we deliver value, respond to change, and learn? Predictability. That was the final one because I knew this one was going to be the toughest one, as it always is. People are like, oh, dear God, it's agile. You can't predict anything. Okay. And are we, this is the question. I was like, are we improving our stakeholders' ability to make effective decisions throughout the life cycle of epics? There's a whole epic development life cycle I built around this, but this is essentially saying, I'm not telling you that I'm going to be 100% on day one. I'm going to give you this thing, but can you make effective decisions throughout the life cycle? Right? Very important words that we chose very carefully. Summary and highlights. Everybody loves a dashboard. I'm blanking out some of the information here because I realize this is going to be recorded, and I think there's some sensitive stuff here. I am sure by default, but not sure everything. And we started scoring, and then I started saying my subjective red, yellow, green is bad. I need to have rules. And so that was like one of the relentless improvements. And this column on the right, so I don't know why the copy didn't come through. This is a summary so people can look at one page and understand what happened on each of these. The right one is called titled Relentless Improvement. And so this is where I am saying we are going to continue to improve each one of these and how we are going to improve each one of these in the next month or in the next quarter, or I'm going to specifically say I'm not going to do it. So that is I won't go through all this kind of stuff, but at a glance, somebody can look at this and it's legit. We also, because we started having a bunch of information, I didn't mean to raise my hand. Can I unraise my hand? I don't know. I started providing summaries, so people could see this stuff pretty quickly. And here's our good old friend. It's still there 24 months later. It still has its carrying cost. There's the SWAT tickets. There's the defects. We have a new thing that's red called incidents, which we have an incident management system now with Datadog and SLOs and all these kinds of wonderful things. And we have ISO 27001 and 27701 certification of all our systems. And we've got Star CSA Star Level 2 of supporting the EU NIS2 directive, all this kind of stuff. Like all the stuff builds on top of all these things, and they're relatively simple to do. Just don't have a consultant come in and do for you. Apologies if there are consultants on this call. They can help. They just need to be directed. Here's our efficiency pillar. I worked with, I'm going to blank out the numbers here. We reduced our Azure spend significantly. And I worked with finance and built a finance forecast, and then we had our engineering forecast. And you can see we typically are below both, right? Productivity, we started setting goals for what our productivity should be in these different categories. And now I'm measuring it and I'm putting this as part of my quarterly goal process, saying, here's how we're going to allocate our capacity. That forces product, it's a forcing function for a lot of other functions to make sure that we're fueled with the right kind of work and things like that. Here's our predictability pillar. Oh, look at that. 100%. And I keep raising the bar now on epics that are done that meet that bar. And I can get into what that bar is. So anywho, that's my pitch, y'all. I know we only got 5 minutes per the clock, but that is where I will stop. And I would love any feedback, and I will look also.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to see you.
Yeah, great to see y'all. I guess the biggest thing that I would ask y'all, like, what's wrong with this is kind of like the first thing that I'd love to hear from y'all. Besides kind of like, oh, it'll never work in my organization. Like that's kind of okay. I got that. But beyond that, what's wrong with it?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think the outcomes of the 24 months and then that journey from I really like that number one of where you start, where you end. But the progression and probably for a longer time frame of how did it progress from that start to end would be useful, at least in my opinion, to understand and learn from. Like, how did your team react to it? What were, if you had meetings on this, what were outcomes to it to cause that iteration to occur and stuff like that?
Yeah, we did. We had monthly meetings with the sort of this working group, and then I wrote did the broad organization had a mechanism where they had monthly review of this with other business units, which stopped. But then I continued, and then I started writing a memo, more the Amazon style, which I was more comfortable with, and then I would joke with people saying, like, if you think this meeting would be better expressed as a memo, like this meeting could have been a memo, you have the memo. So I would tell people, you don't even have to come to the meeting, you've got it all. But if you have questions, come to the meeting. And that's where we got a lot of that feedback, especially as we started pitching new things in there, and we would get that feedback. It became more organic. And then Colin, you asked,
Oh, I don't know if that's valuable to discuss because I just don't share by default. Maybe it's the nature of the culture that my teams are in and where they are in their own comfort in
yeah,
experimenting and owning their own process. That at this point, it feels good for them to be able to try on a metric for 3 weeks and decide if they want to keep it
right.
and stuff like that.
Right. So So I don't want to say, please don't take from what I've said and realize I was probably being a bit too emphatic. Story points are cool. I think most of us probably know the reason story points exist and the power that story points have. The teams, it's for the teams. And so everything I'm talking about is really the external facing metrics, productivity metrics. The internal teams, there were teams there that were doing Kanban, there were some that were doing Scrum, there were some that doing all sorts of different kinds of things that were important to them to solve the problems that they had. And I thought that was really important to like, I didn't want to dictate it. And there was sort of a central agile planning function, which we didn't have after some financial problems. And so like it was seen as a best practice to like start with the team and then go all the way up. I shouldn't say up to the right or touch it to the left with the management layer. And I wanted to break that and just say the teams need what they need. And then from an organization perspective, we want to, provide that information to our stakeholders. So I agree with 100%, Colin. Like the teams need the safety to do what they do, and share what they share. And sometimes what like I will tell you, like a lot of the velocity stuff, which we got into cycle time and lead time and things like that, that came out of the teams because they were making really great strides in that. And then all of a sudden we said, this is a good metric for the entire organization, is to see those are the door metrics. And we're like, let's put those in there. We didn't have them before, but so we added them.
I also want to add that you mentioned that your tool defaults, that those tools are opinionated, and they're not necessarily wrong opinions, but they might not be your opinions. Um, Man, it's so disappointing that if the only measurement unit fully baked into your reporting suite is story points, then somebody somewhere might just decide to standardize the whole organization on story
Right.
points in 2024
Yep.
just for reporting purposes.
Because there's
Um,
nothing else. You're right. And I mean, I will say I got a lot of pushback from my team because a lot of the early stuff to sort of the first few months, I shouldn't say pushback. There's a lot of, oh, really, Matt? It's like we have to hand tool this stuff. Like the product, like where people were allocated and the type, it's like it was a freaking spreadsheet. But Matt, like the tool, like, and we'd have to do all this stuff, and I'm like, it's a freaking spreadsheet. It's fine. And no shade on any of the team members. Some of them might be here or watching it later. I was like, they're running their teams. They're running all of this kind of stuff. I'm like, I can help. Like, so there was a lot of me doing a lot of like spreadsheets and asking questions and like in one-on-one meetings, hey, director of engineering, how many people do you have on your team? How many of them are working on what? Like it started out that way. And then some of my partners, this working group, this one guy, Pete, he was like, I'm not doing spreadsheets anymore, Matt. He stayed up and like did something with Azure Power BI and stuff like that. And it's like, I've automated it for you. So you never have to do this. It bothers me that you're doing this. Like he's very, very good, very conscientious guy. So like I was just like, let's get something that works and hack it. And then, good. When you get a good diverse team of perspectives, then all of a sudden, like magic starts happening.
Well, if you don't mind if I speak up, even though I'm not
Please.
in Austin, I'm not from Austin, but I attend your guys' meetings regularly. I think you've got an awesome group here, and I wish we had one in Cincinnati. But I also wish we had a better football team, baseball team, and a lot of other stuff that I don't get. So, um,
Art of the possible, Joe.
so in my experience has been, I do a lot of data analysis and a lot of Power BI and stuff like that. My experience is that I use these kind of metrics to protect my teams.
Mm.
And specifically, if we see that there's an area where we're struggling, say, in quality, that the team already knows that. And then in that slide deck, when you're reviewing, we say, we know we have an issue here.
Yeah.
And here's how we're addressing it. Right. So you never leave it up to have people say, what's that problem? Why aren't they doing this or that? Right. You come with a solution, and that makes things a lot easier. But the other thing that I've also found is that, of course, we've all seen this, that things shouldn't be used as measurements, like story points become measurements. And then it becomes a system. And as long as there's a system, someone's going to game the system. So
Right.
I have had teams that they know that if they put anything, we never allowed a 13. And if you made something an 8, I was going to ask some questions. Just ask
Right.
questions. Like, we thought through this. But if you did a 3 or a 5, that pretty much let it slide. So
Yep.
everything became a 3 or a 5, right? So basing it on story points, as I'm sure Colin, I think you were talking about this as well, is if you want it is bad, because if you want it to look a certain, I had guys tell me like, okay, I'll just make everything a 13 and I'll do one story or whatever. And then when I get a whole bunch done, we'll look a lot better, right? So
Right.
it's a tough balancing act, but when you do it from I think when you do it from a perspective of saying, you know, we're going to use this information. I know that you're not supposed to be judged on this information, but we all know you're gonna,
Mm.
right? Because that's the nature of management. And so let's understand the narrative, and let's try to control the narrative and make sure that we have answers to the narrative, and we just aren't in a meeting going like, oh, right.
Right.
So, and that's what the data can help you do. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that is observed over and over again, and there is some basis for Kanban people thinking about an SLA versus story points.
Mm.
Can we meet the SLA? But if you look at your estimates and your actuals, story points, how close are you getting? Because there's often a complete absence of correlation, especially if you're multitasking. And unless you've got a team that really, kind of has done the mind meld, and we're not in very new territory, trying new tools, et cetera, it is reasonable that you cannot estimate well. Even when we supposedly had scientific methods, we rarely
Mm.
got within 20%. And it makes sense to start taking a look at that. Mob programmers often work as a team, one story at a time. Or maybe you swarm separate teams on just a couple. But to whatever degree you're trying to do too many things at once, your measurements become worthless anyway because you're task switching too much.
Yeah, just a couple of things on both those points. The first one is I love the idea that, I mean, engineers, software developers, many creative people, we love gaming systems, right? We love gaming, right? There's like it's fun. Like you probably did puzzles, and like if you're in this field at all, like you like solving problems, right? And you like to win. And one of the things that was interesting about the velocity metrics is somebody said, well, Matt, if you put that as a top one, like cycle time, like the ability to like get things out to production quickly, like from when it starts, when it gets in an engineer's hand to the time that it actually makes it in production, they're going to make everything like really small, and they're going to game it because like
Yeah.
that's on the dashboard. And I said, I want them to game it. I want them
Exactly.
to cheat. Please cheat. Please do things in very small increments to get it out there into production. And like, I don't know if you saw, like, I mean, there were things that were like hundreds of days. Like, it was like really long. So I'm like, dude, if you get down to like, I mean, like, we're not going to get into like seconds or anything, but like, if we get down to like 20 days, like, oh my God, that's like amazing. So even the Azure bill spend, it's like, if you can game this to save 20% of our bill, that is a materially different outcome for our business. Like, please do game it, right? Those were the things that we were, and then you start tying into like, whether it's like not story points delivered per person, but it's like you start thinking of the developer productivity metrics. It's like, I contributed. How did you contribute? The work I did and my team, but like, let's say that, in general, team members, builders, like kind of mostly do one thing. Yes, I know they come together, but it's like you have a lead and maybe a couple other people that help. That's like, that's what that person did, is they lowered the Azure bill by 30%. Like, and how did they do that? Well, they did all this great engineering work, and then you have a principal engineer and says, boy, that guy, senior engineer, probably needs to be at the next level because look at what they contributed, right? Like those kinds of things. Now I've got like a way to, and I would tell people, it's also excellent resume fodder too. They're like, resume fodder? I'm like, that, like, yeah, your career capital, you should be building your career capital. We're probably not all going to work here for the rest of our lives. So you should be able to explain the impact of the work that you did. So I think all those things, if you sort of shift the mindset around, and I know it's not easy. It's never easy in any organization I've been in, and I've been sort of a change agent to do these kinds of things. You start getting that buy-in from the people, and they start seeing the results. So, but yeah, gaming is totally okay as long as as the thing that's being gamed is the desired outcome.